Welcome, dear listener, and thank you for settling in with us this evening. You are about to embark on a slow, peaceful journey through one of humanity's most quietly extraordinary chapters, the story of NASA's Artemis II mission, the first crewed voyage to the moon in over half a century. Allow each word to drift gently over you like a soft tide, carrying you further into a state of calm and ease. There's nothing to do right now but breathe, relax, and simply listen. The Artemis II mission is NASA's second flight under the broader Artemis program, a long-term initiative designed to return human beings to the lunar surface for the first time since the Apollo 17 mission concluded in December of 1972, a gap of more than 5 decades of human absence from the moon's vicinity. The mission is specifically structured as a crewed lunar flyby, meaning the spacecraft and its 4 passengers will travel to the moon, loop gracefully around it, and return to Earth without landing on the surface. This careful, methodical approach allows engineers to validate all human-rated systems before committing to a landing mission in a later flight. The trajectory is a deliberate and elegantly planned arc across the deep silence of cislunar space. The 4 astronauts selected to fly aboard Artemis II represent a historic and carefully balanced crew that reflects the evolving face of human spaceflight in the 21st century. Commander Reed Wiseman, a United States Navy test pilot and veteran NASA astronaut, will lead the crew with steady experience and calm professionalism accumulated through years of spaceflight training. Pilot Victor Glover, an equally accomplished Navy aviator, will serve as the mission's pilot and becomes a particularly significant figure in this historic flight. Mission specialists Christina Koch and Canadian Space Agency astronaut Jeremy Hansen round out the crew, bringing deep scientific and operational expertise to every phase of the journey. Victor Glover's role in Artemis II carries a particular weight of historical significance, as he will become the first person of African American heritage to travel to the moon, or more precisely, to venture into deep cislunar space on a trajectory that carries the crew around the moon. This milestone quietly but profoundly expands the tapestry of human space exploration, weaving a new and meaningful thread into the long story of who gets to journey beyond the protective cradle of Earth's atmosphere. Glover's presence on this mission is not merely symbolic. He is a highly trained aviator with extensive spaceflight experience from his time aboard the International Space Station. Christina Koch, another member of the Artemis II crew, holds a remarkable record that connects directly to the spirit of this mission. She spent 328 consecutive days aboard the International Space Station during her record-breaking mission from 2019 to 2020, the longest single spaceflight ever completed by a woman. Her presence on Artemis II means she will become the first woman to travel to the vicinity of the moon, a milestone that the Artemis program has made central to its identity and its vision of inclusive exploration. Koch's endurance, scientific capability, and calm composure under pressure make her an invaluable member of the CREW. Jeremy Hansen, representing the Canadian Space Agency, will become the first Canadian and the first non-American to journey beyond low Earth orbit and travel into the vast expanse of deep cislunar space. Canada's participation in the Artemis program reflects the deep and enduring partnership between NASA and the Canadian Space Agency, a relationship that has produced decades of collaboration on the Space Shuttle program, the International Space Station, and now the Lunar Gateway project. Hansen's inclusion in this crew speaks to the increasingly international character of human space exploration, where the dream of reaching the moon is no longer confined to any single nat. Orion. The spacecraft that will carry the Artemis II crew on their historic journey is the Orion Multipurpose Crew Vehicle, commonly known simply as Orion, a capsule-shaped spacecraft that represents one of the most sophisticated human-rated vehicles ever engineered. Orion is approximately 16.5 feet, or about 5 meters, in diameter, making it considerably larger than the Apollo capsules that carried astronauts to the moon during the 1960s and 1970s. The spacecraft is designed to support a crew of up to 4 astronauts and can sustain life in deep space for missions lasting up to 21 days, with extended durations possible when docked to a supporting spacecraft or HAB. The Space Launch System, universally referred to as SLS, is the towering rocket that will lift the Orion spacecraft and its crew off the surface of Earth and accelerate them toward the Moon at extraordinary velocities. At its Block 1 configuration, the SLS stands approximately 322 feet tall, about 98 meters, making it one of the tallest rockets ever assembled, surpassing even the legendary Saturn V in height when the entire configuration, including the Orion spacecraft and its launch abort system, is measured. The rocket produces a staggering total thrust of approximately 8.8 million pounds at liftoff, a force so immense that it rivals the combined power of countless jet engines operating simultaneously. The Artemis II mission is scheduled to follow a specific type of lunar trajectory known as a free return trajectory, an elegant and mathematically precise path through space that uses the Moon's gravitational field to naturally curve the spacecraft back toward Earth even in the event of a propulsion failure during certain phases of the mission. This trajectory is reminiscent of the one taken by the Apollo 13 mission, which famously used the Moon's gravity as a cosmic slingshot to guide the crippled spacecraft safely back to Earth in 1970. The free return path is a beautiful example of celestial mechanics, the art of allowing the invisible geometry of gravitational forces to do much of the navigation and work. The Artemis II crew will spend approximately 10 days in space during their mission, a duration carefully calibrated to accomplish all of the mission's objectives while managing the physical and psychological demands placed upon the human body in the deep space environment beyond low Earth orbit. During those 10 days, the crew will travel a total distance of roughly 4,600 miles, or about 7,400 kilometers, beyond the far side of the Moon at their closest approach to the lunar surface, making this the farthest journey from Earth ever attempted by human beings at any point in history. The sheer scale of that distance, measured quietly against the velvet darkness of space, is a number that invites slow and peaceful contemplation. The Orion spacecraft is equipped with a sophisticated environmental control and life support system, commonly abbreviated as ECLSS, which manages everything from the breathable atmosphere inside the cabin to the temperature, humidity, carbon dioxide levels, and the purity of the water available to the crew. This system must function flawlessly in the harsh and unforgiving environment of deep cislunar space, where the spacecraft is exposed to radiation from the sun and cosmic sources, while temperature swings between sunlit and shadowed portions of its orbit, and the complete absence of any possibility of emergency resupply or rescue. The life support architecture is a masterpiece of redundant engineering, with multiple backup systems layered carefully beneath every primary component. The Artemis II mission serves as the essential human validation test for the Orion spacecraft's complete suite of systems, following the successful uncrewed Artemis I mission that flew to the Moon and back between November and December of 2022. During Artemis I, the Orion capsule traveled more than 1.4 million miles in total, a remarkable distance for an uncrewed test flight, and returned through Earth's atmosphere at speeds approaching 24,500 miles per hour, demonstrating the heat shield's capability to protect a future crew from the intense thermal energy generated during high-speed re-entry. Artemis II will now repeat that journey with living, breathing human beings aboard, validating every aspect of the spacecraft's performance in a real operational environment. The Orion spacecraft's heat shield is one of its most technically sophisticated components, constructed from a material called Avcoat, an ablative thermal protection compound that was also used in a modified form on the Apollo capsules more than 50 years ago. During atmospheric re-entry at the conclusion of the Artemis missions, the heat shield must withstand temperatures approaching approximately 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly half the temperature of the surface of the Sun, generated by the rapid compression and heating of atmospheric gases as the capsule plunges downward at hypersonic velocity. The material works by gradually ablating or burning away in a controlled manner, absorbing and dissipating thermal energy before it can reach the aluminum structure and crew compartment beneath. The Orion spacecraft communicates with Earth through a network of ground stations and relay satellites, maintaining a constant link across the vast distances of cislunar space. A link that stretches, at its farthest point during the Artemis 2 trajectory, to a distance of more than 250,000 miles. At such distances, even radio signals traveling at the speed of light experience a noticeable delay of approximately 1.3 seconds each way, meaning that any message exchanged between the crew and mission control at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, takes nearly 3 seconds for a round-trip conversation. This subtle but real communications delay is a quiet reminder of the profound distances involved in any journey to the Moon's vicinity. The Space Launch System rocket that will carry Artemis 2 burns a combination of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen in its 4 RS-25 main engines, the same type of engines that powered the Space Shuttle's main propulsion system for 30 years of continuous service. These engines are not newly manufactured for the SLS. Rather, they are flight-proven engines that were previously used on various Space Shuttle missions, carefully refurbished, updated with modern controllers, and requalified to power the new generation of deep space exploration. There is something quietly beautiful about the continuity this represents. Engines that once carried the Space Shuttle now serving the next chapter of American human spaceflight. The Kennedy Space Center in Florida, which serves as the launch site for the Artemis 2 mission, has been the gateway to space for NASA's crewed missions since the earliest days of the Apollo program in the 1960s. Launch Complex 39B, from which the Artemis missions depart, is a modified version of the same launch pad that once supported Apollo and Space Shuttle launches, now extensively upgraded to accommodate the unique requirements of the Space Launch System. The facility sits on Florida's Space Coast, surrounded by the serene wetlands and wildlife refuges that make the area one of the most ecologically diverse in the southeastern United States, a quiet counterpoint to the extraordinary technology assembled there. The Vehicle Assembly Building at the Kennedy Space Center, where the Space Launch System is carefully stacked and assembled before each mission, is one of the largest structures by enclosed volume anywhere on Earth, with an interior volume of approximately 129,428,000 cubic feet, so vast that clouds have historically been known to form inside the building on humid Florida days, a phenomenon that gives the structure an almost mythological quality. The building stands 525 feet tall and covers 8 acres of ground, and it was originally constructed in the 1960s specifically for the assembly of the Saturn V rockets that carried Apollo astronauts to the Moon. Its continued use for the Artemis program creates an unbroken physical link to the original age of lunar exploration. The Orion spacecraft's solar arrays, which unfold like elegant geometric petals after the spacecraft separates from the upper stage of the SLS rocket, generate approximately 11 kilowatts of electrical power, enough to meet all of the spacecraft's energy needs throughout the mission while still maintaining a comfortable margin for unexpected power demands. These arrays are positioned and sized to function effectively across a range of solar distances and angles, from the relatively bright sunlight available in Earth-Moon space to the more challenging lighting conditions that future Artemis missions may encounter as the program eventually extends further into the solar system. The arrays give the Orion spacecraft a distinctive and graceful silhouette against the blackness of space. The Artemis program draws its name from the twin sister of Apollo in ancient Greek mythology, Artemis, the goddess of the moon, the hunt, and the wilderness, a deity of calm power and quiet authority over the natural world. This naming choice was deliberate and meaningful, signaling NASA's intention to build upon the legacy of the Apollo program while expanding it in both scope and inclusivity, particularly through the commitment to land the first woman on the moon during the program's later missions. The mythological symmetry is elegant. Apollo brought humanity to the moon for the first time, and Artemis will bring humanity back, this time with a broader and more diverse cast of explorers. The Artemis II crew will wear the newly designed Orion Crew Survival System suit during launch and re-entry, a suit that was developed to keep astronauts safe during emergency scenarios while also being comfortable enough to wear throughout the mission's most dynamic phases. This suit is an evolution of the advanced crew escape suit worn by space shuttle crews, updated with modern materials, improved mobility, and enhanced life support capabilities appropriate for the deep space environment beyond low Earth orbit. The suit's design reflects decades of accumulated knowledge about human factors, thermal comfort, and the physiological demands of high-G acceleration during launch and re-entry. The Artemis II mission trajectory includes a phase called the distant retrograde orbit insertion in later Artemis missions, but for Artemis II specifically, the crew will follow a high lunar flyby path that takes them around the far side of the Moon, a region of the lunar surface that is permanently turned away from Earth and that no human eye has ever observed directly, only through photographs taken by robotic spacecraft. The far side of the Moon is a geologically distinct and scientifically fascinating landscape, characterized by a heavily cratered terrain and a crust that is noticeably thicker than the Earth-facing near side. The crew of Artemis II will have a perspective on this hidden lunar face that has been denied to every human being in history. The Orion spacecraft's service module, a cylindrical structure that attaches to the bottom of the crew module and provides propulsion, electrical power, thermal regulation, and consumables, is designed and built not by NASA but by the European Space Agency through a collaboration with the prime contractor Airbus Defence and Space. This arrangement makes the Artemis missions a genuinely transatlantic endeavor, with the propulsion and utility systems of the spacecraft coming from European engineering and the crew module and launch system coming from American industry. The service module burns a bipropellant combination of nitrogen tetroxide and monomethylhydrazine to perform the trajectory corrections and orbital maneuvers needed throughout the mission. The Artemis program's ultimate goal, beyond the Artemis II flyby mission, is to establish a sustainable human presence in the vicinity of the Moon and eventually on the lunar surface itself, particularly at the Moon's south polar region, an area of extraordinary scientific interest because it contains permanently shadowed craters that are believed to harbor substantial deposits of water ice. This water ice is not merely scientifically fascinating. It represents a potential resource of immense practical value, as it could theoretically be processed into drinking water, breathable oxygen, and even rocket propellant through a process called electrolysis, supporting the long-term goal of reducing Earth-dependent supply chains for future deep space missions. The Orion spacecraft incorporates a passive thermal control system that slowly rotates the vehicle along its long axis during cruise phases of the mission, a maneuver commonly called a barbecue roll by NASA engineers. A technique first employed during the Apollo missions to evenly distribute solar heating across all surfaces of the spacecraft and prevent any single side from becoming dangerously hot or cold. Without this gentle, continuous rotation, the sun-facing side of the spacecraft could heat to temperatures of several hundred degrees while the shadowed side simultaneously chilled to deeply negative temperatures, creating destructive thermal gradients across the vehicle's structure and systems. The slow, steady rotation is a beautifully simple solution to a complex problem. The Artemis II mission will mark the first time human beings have ventured beyond the protective magnetosphere of Earth since the final Apollo mission more than 50 years ago, a significant fact from a radiation safety perspective, as Earth's magnetic field deflects much of the high-energy charged particle radiation that continuously streams through the solar system from both the Sun and from cosmic sources beyond our galaxy. In deep cislunar space, the crew will be exposed to a radiation environment that is measurably more intense than what astronauts experience in low Earth orbit aboard the International Space Station. NASA has developed detailed shielding strategies and real-time radiation monitoring protocols to manage crew exposure throughout the mission. The launch of Artemis II is planned to occur from Launch Complex 39B using a process that takes the assembled SLS rocket from its storage position inside the vehicle assembly building to the launch pad on a massive tracked vehicle called the Crawler Transporter. the same type of vehicle, updated and reinforced, that carried the Saturn V and Space Shuttle stacks to their pads during earlier eras of NASA history. The crawler transporter moves at a maximum speed of approximately 1 mile per hour while carrying its enormous payload, making the roughly 4-mile journey from the VAB to the launch pad a slow, deliberate, and almost meditative procession that can take up to 12 hours to complete. The Orion spacecraft's abort system, the Launch Abort System, or LAS, sits perched atop the capsule like a slender tower during the most critical moments of launch, ready to fire within milliseconds and pull the crew module away from a failing rocket at accelerations that would carry the astronauts to safety faster than almost any other mechanism in spaceflight history. The LAS can activate and remove the crew module from danger in as little as 300 milliseconds from the moment it receives an abort signal, pulling the capsule away at forces of approximately 15 gs before parachutes deploy to guide it to a survivable water or land landing. Once the rocket clears the most dangerous portion of the ascent, the abort tower is jettisoned and the capsule continues on its mission. The Artemis program's plan to build and deploy the Lunar Gateway, a small modular space station to be positioned in a near-rectilinear halo orbit around the Moon, represents one of the most ambitious construction projects in the history of human spaceflight, and Artemis 2 is an important early step toward that goal by validating the crew transportation systems that will eventually service the Gateway. The Gateway is designed to serve as both a way station for astronauts traveling to and from the lunar surface and as an independent research platform for scientific investigations in the unique deep space environment of cislunar space. Canada, Japan, Europe, and the United States are all contributing hardware to the Gateway under international partnership agreements. One of the key objectives of the Artemis 2 mission is to evaluate and validate the Orion spacecraft's environmental control and life support systems, specifically its ability to maintain a safe and comfortable atmosphere for human beings across the full duration of a 10-day deep space mission, including all of the challenging phases of launch, translunar coast, lunar flyby, and re-entry. Engineers will monitor cabin pressure, oxygen partial pressure, carbon dioxide scrubbing efficiency, temperature, humidity, and water quality throughout the mission to build a comprehensive performance dataset that will inform the design and operation of future Artemis missions and the Lunar Gateway habitat systems. The health of the atmosphere inside that small capsule is everything. The Artemis program includes a specific and publicly stated commitment to landing the first woman and the first person of color on the Moon during future Artemis missions, a commitment that distinguishes this era of lunar exploration from the exclusively male and exclusively white crew compositions of the Apollo program. This commitment is woven into the fundamental mission architecture of the program, shaping crew selection, suit design, and the design of facilities and equipment to be used on the lunar surface. The Artemis name itself, chosen to honor the goddess of the Moon and twin sister of Apollo, carries a deliberate symbolic charge that acknowledges this expanded vision of who belongs in space. The Orion spacecraft's primary structure is constructed from an aluminum-lithium alloy, a lightweight yet remarkably strong material that offers excellent structural performance while minimizing the mass that must be accelerated to lunar velocities by the Space Launch System. The use of aluminum-lithium alloys in spacecraft construction has a long history in aerospace engineering, valued for its stiffness-to-weight ratio that is significantly better than conventional aluminum alloys. Every kilogram of structural mass saved in Orion's design translates directly into mission capability, more propellant, more scientific equipment, or simply a more comfortable margin of safety. The Artemis 2 crew will undergo years of rigorous training at various NASA facilities before the mission, including extensive work in the Johnson Space Center's Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory, a massive pool approximately 202 feet long, 102 feet wide, and 40 feet deep, filled with about 6 million gallons of water and used to simulate the weightlessness of space through the approximate neutral buoyancy of underwater training. The pool contains full-scale mock-ups of spacecraft components and systems, and astronauts spend countless hours there rehearsing procedures, practicing contingency responses, and developing the intuitive physical familiarity with their spacecraft that becomes critical in actual spaceflight. The Space Launch System's core stage, the large central orange cylinder that forms the backbone of the rocket, measures approximately 212 feet, or about 65 meters, in length and 27.6 feet in diameter, making it the largest rocket stage ever built specifically for an American rocket. The core stage carries approximately 537,000 gallons of liquid hydrogen and 196,000 gallons of liquid oxygen in two massive tanks separated by a common bulkhead, and all of this propellant is consumed by the four RS-25 engines during the approximately 8 minutes of powered flight from launch to main engine cutoff. The scale of these numbers, considered quietly, gives some sense of the engineering achievement represented by each launch. The Artemis II mission will use a specific trajectory profile to travel from Earth to the Moon that exploits the precise gravitational geometry of the Earth-Moon system, allowing the spacecraft to reach the lunar vicinity with optimal propellant efficiency. After the SLS delivers Orion to a parking orbit just above Earth's atmosphere, the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, a modified variant of a cryogenic upper stage, will perform a translunar injection burn that increases the spacecraft's speed enough to escape Earth's immediate gravitational influence and coast on a carefully calculated arc toward the Moon. The elegance of this trajectory, shaped entirely by gravitational forces and precise timing, represents the practical application of orbital mechanics at its most refined. The Orion spacecraft's windows, 4 of them in the crew module, are made from layers of borosilicate glass and a scratch-resistant outer pane, designed to withstand the thermal and mechanical stresses of launch, the deep cold of space, and the intense heat of re-entry without distortion or structural failure. These windows give the crew a clear, undistorted view of the universe outside, including the breathtaking spectacle of the whole Moon and the whole Earth visible simultaneously through the same window, a perspective available only to the handful of human beings who have ever traveled to the Moon's vicinity. The view through those windows during the Artemis II mission will be one of the most extraordinary sights ever beheld by human eyes. The interim cryogenic propulsion stage, or ICPS, that performs the translunar injection burn for Artemis missions is derived from the Delta cryogenic second stage used on the United Launch Alliance Delta IV rocket family, a heritage design with an extensive and reliable flight history in commercial and government satellite launch missions. The ICPS burns liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen and is capable of delivering approximately 24,750 pounds of thrust during the translunar injection burn, a burn that typically lasts around 18 minutes and accelerates the Orion spacecraft from its initial parking orbit velocity of about 17,500 miles per hour to the approximately 24,500 miles per hour needed to reach the Moon. The Artemis program is managed through a complex and carefully coordinated organizational structure that involves not only NASA's field centers but also dozens of prime contractors and hundreds of smaller suppliers distributed across nearly every state in the United States. The prime contractors for the major Artemis systems include Boeing for the SLS core stage, Northrop Grumman for the solid rocket boosters, Lockheed Martin for the Orion spacecraft, and Aerojet Rocketdyne for the RS-25 engines, among many others. This distributed industrial base has the practical effect of ensuring that the political and economic support for the program is broad and geographically diverse. The solid rocket boosters that augment the thrust of the Space Launch System's main engines during the first 2 minutes of flight are the largest solid propellant boosters ever flown, measuring approximately 177 feet in length and producing about 3.6 million pounds of thrust each at ignition, for a combined total of 7.2 million pounds of thrust from the 2 boosters alone, before the RS-25 main engine's contribution is added. These boosters are derived directly from the Space Shuttle's solid rocket boosters, though they have been extended by 1 additional propellant segment, each booster now consisting of 5 segments rather than the 4-segment configuration used on the shuttle. The Artemis I mission, which flew without a crew in late 2022, carried aboard the Orion spacecraft a collection of scientific instruments and biological samples designed to measure the radiation environment inside the vehicle during a lunar mission profile, data that will directly inform the radiation protection strategies and exposure limits applied to the human crew of Artemis II. Among the items flown on Artemis I were phantom torso mannequins loaded with radiation sensors throughout their internal structure, providing an unprecedented three-dimensional picture of how cosmic and solar radiation penetrates spacecraft shielding and interacts with simulated human tissue at various depths. The Orion spacecraft's guidance, navigation, and control systems represent some of the most sophisticated avionics ever integrated into a human-rated spacecraft, combining star trackers, inertial measurement units, GPS receivers, and onboard flight computers to maintain precise knowledge of the vehicle's position, velocity, and attitude throughout every phase of the mission. The onboard flight computers carry redundant software capable of autonomous navigation in the event that communications with Earth are disrupted, a critical capability for missions to the far side of the Moon, where line-of-sight contact with Earth is physically impossible for a portion of the trajectory. The Artemis II mission's planned splashdown recovery will take place in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of San Diego, California, where the United States Navy operates a well-practiced recovery force capable of retrieving the Orion capsule and its crew safely from the ocean surface. The capsule descends under a cluster of parachutes in the final minutes of re-entry, decelerating from hypersonic velocities to a relatively gentle splashdown speed of approximately 17 miles per hour at water contact, a landing cushioned by the Pacific Ocean's surface and managed by the carefully engineered parachute sequence deployed at specific altitudes during the descent. Recovery crews have trained extensively for this moment. One of the quieter but deeply significant aspects of the Artemis II mission is its role in validating the communication relay systems that will be needed for future surface operations at the lunar South Pole, where the terrain's extreme topography means that direct line-of-sight communication with Earth will not always be possible from the proposed landing sites. The mission will provide valuable operational data on the performance of NASA's Deep Space Network, the global array of large dish antennas that provides communication and tracking services for missions throughout the solar system, at lunar distances with a human crew generating realistic communication traffic patterns. The Artemis II crew will experience a gradual and medically significant physiological transition during the first days of their mission as their bodies adapt to the microgravity environment of deep space, a process that involves the redistribution of approximately 2 liters of fluid from the lower body toward the head and upper body, causing subtle facial puffiness, nasal congestion, and a temporary shift in the brain's positioning within the skull. These adaptations, uncomfortable as they may sound, are well understood from decades of human spaceflight experience aboard space shuttle missions and the International Space Station, and the crew will be well prepared to manage them with hydration protocols, medications, and exercise routines. The Orion spacecraft's thermal control system uses a network of fluid loops, radiator panels, and heaters to maintain all components and the crew compartment within safe operating temperature ranges across the extreme thermal environment of deep space, where unshaded surfaces exposed to direct sunlight can reach temperatures above 250 degrees Fahrenheit, while simultaneously shadowed surfaces can fall below -250 degrees Fahrenheit, a swing of 500 degrees across the spacecraft's body at any given moment. Managing this thermal environment while keeping the crew comfortable and the electronics functional is one of the most demanding engineering challenges of deep space spacecraft design. The Artemis II mission represents a significant evolution in the culture of NASA crewed spaceflight management, incorporating lessons learned not only from the Apollo and Space Shuttle programs but also from decades of continuous human presence aboard the International Space Station, which has been continuously inhabited since November of the year 2000. The mission planning process incorporates detailed crew workload analyses, psychological support protocols, and carefully structured daily schedules that balance mission-critical activities with rest, exercise, personal time, and regular private family communications, an approach to human factors that recognizes the whole person, not just the astronaut professional. The name Artemis was chosen for NASA's lunar return program through a process that sought a name resonant with history, mythology, and the expanded vision of the program, and it was officially announced by NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine in May of 2019. The selection carries mathematical and mythological elegance. The Apollo program ran from the early 1960s through 1972, exploring the moon through the lens of the sun god's twin brother, while the Artemis program now returns to that same moon through the mythological identity of the moon goddess herself, closing a poetic circle that spans decades and civilizations. The Artemis II mission will produce a wealth of scientific and engineering data about the human physiological response to the deep cislunar radiation environment, as the crew's biomedical parameters will be monitored continuously throughout the mission through a suite of wearable sensors and regular medical assessments. This data will contribute to ongoing research into how the human body responds to the enhanced radiation exposure that occurs beyond Earth's magnetosphere, information that is essential for planning longer duration missions to the lunar surface and, eventually, to Mars. The crew members of Artemis II are, in a very real sense, contributing to the medical literature of deep space human physiology. The Orion spacecraft carries a crew of 4 in a pressurized volume of approximately 316 cubic feet, a space roughly equivalent to a small walk-in closet, which will be home to the 4 Artemis II astronauts for up to 10 days. By comparison, the Apollo command module that carried 3 astronauts had an interior volume of approximately 218 cubic feet, and the earlier Mercury capsules carried a single astronaut in just 36 cubic feet of pressurized space. The Orion's interior, while compact by terrestrial standards, represents a meaningful improvement over its predecessors and has been carefully optimized for crew comfort, ergonomics, and operational efficiency. The moon that the Artemis II crew will swing around is a natural satellite approximately 2,159 miles in diameter, about 1/4 the diameter of Earth, orbiting our planet at an average distance of approximately 238,855 miles, a distance that varies slightly over the course of each month due to the moon's slightly elliptical orbit. The moon's surface gravity is approximately 1/6 that of Earth's, meaning that a person who weighs 180 pounds on Earth would weigh only about 30 pounds on the lunar surface, a fact that profoundly shapes every aspect of the surface operations planned for future Artemis landing missions, from suit design to habitat architecture to exploration vehicle engineering. The Artemis II mission will require close coordination between NASA's Mission Control Center in Houston, Texas, and multiple international partner agency control centers, including the European Space Agency's control facility in Cologne, Germany, which manages the European Service Module's systems and monitors its health throughout the mission. This distributed mission control architecture reflects the genuinely international character of the Artemis program and creates a network of expertise and capability that spans continents and time zones. The continuous coordination required between these facilities is itself a significant operational achievement that demonstrates the depth of the international partnership. The Artemis program's broader scientific goals include understanding the geological history of the lunar South Polar region, characterizing the water ice deposits in permanently shadowed craters, and studying the interaction between solar wind particles and the lunar surface in the absence of a global magnetic field. These scientific objectives complement the human exploration and technology demonstration goals of the program, ensuring that each Artemis mission contributes to a growing body of knowledge about the moon's composition, structure, and history, knowledge that has implications not only for our understanding of the moon but for our understanding of the entire inner solar system's formation and evolution. The Artemis II crew capsule will be one of the most heavily instrumented spacecraft ever to carry human beings, with sensors monitoring not only the crew's physiological status but also the structural health of the vehicle, the radiation environment both inside and outside the capsule, the performance of every major system, and the precise trajectory of the spacecraft through cislunar space. This comprehensive instrumentation produces a data stream of extraordinary richness that engineers and scientists on the ground will analyze in near real time to ensure the safety of the mission and to build the understanding needed for future, longer-duration Artemis missions. The cislunar space environment through which the Artemis II crew will travel is not the empty vacuum of popular imagination but rather a region threaded with solar wind particles, occasional energetic particles from solar flare events, and the constant low-level flux of galactic cosmic rays originating from sources far beyond our own solar system. Ancient stellar explosions whose energetic echoes still travel through the galaxy billions of years later. Understanding this radiation environment in detail, with human beings aboard a spacecraft designed to carry people to the moon, is one of the key scientific achievements that Artemis II will contribute to the field of space medicine. The Orion spacecraft was first publicly unveiled as a concept in 2004 and has gone through more than 2 decades of design evolution, testing, and refinement before achieving its current configuration, a development timeline that reflects the extraordinary complexity of designing a human-rated spacecraft for the deep space environment. During that time, the spacecraft underwent structural tests that subjected it to forces beyond those expected in flight, thermal vacuum tests in chambers that replicated the environment of space, and a series of parachute tests that validated the system responsible for slowing the capsule from hypersonic speed to a safe splashdown velocity during re-entry. The Artemis II crew will eat specially prepared food designed for the unique constraints of deep space travel, nutritionally complete, pre-packaged meals that can be rehydrated with water recovered from the spacecraft's humidity management system or consumed directly without preparation. The menu was developed in close collaboration with the crew members themselves and with NASA's food scientists at the Johnson Space Center, with attention paid not only to nutritional requirements but also to palatability and the psychological comfort that familiar, satisfying food provides during a demanding and psychologically intense mission. A good meal in space, crew members consistently report, is one of the simple joys of a long voyage. The flight path of Artemis II represents the longest crewed mission beyond low Earth orbit since the Apollo 17 mission returned to Earth in December of 1972, a mission that lasted about 12 days and carried astronauts Harrison Schmitt, Eugene Cernan, and Ronald Evans to the Moon and back. The more than 50-year gap between Apollo 17 and Artemis II is one of the longest pauses in any sustained national scientific or exploratory program in modern history, a period during which humanity's ambitions were directed toward Earth orbit and the development of the International Space Station rather than the deep space frontier. The Artemis II mission is the second mission in the Artemis sequence, following the uncrewed Artemis I test flight, and it will be followed by Artemis III, the planned crewed lunar landing mission that will use the SpaceX Starship human landing system to transport astronauts from the Lunar Gateway or the Orion spacecraft down to the lunar surface. This sequential mission architecture is deliberately progressive, with each mission building upon the validated capabilities of its predecessor, ensuring that human beings are not placed in untested environments or systems. The patience and methodical care embodied in this approach reflects the hard lessons learned from more than 6 decades of human spaceflight. The Orion capsule's main display consoles, 3 large touchscreen displays arranged across the instrument panel, are informally known as the glass cockpit and represent a significant departure from the switch-heavy analog instrument panels of the Apollo era. These displays present flight data, system status, navigation information, and crew procedures in a flexible, reconfigurable format that can be adapted to the specific needs of any mission phase. The glass cockpit was designed in close collaboration with astronaut crews to ensure that the information presentation is intuitive and efficient, reducing workload during the most demanding periods of flight. The Artemis II crew will have access to a modest but carefully curated selection of personal items carried in a small allotment of personal stowage, a tradition dating back to the earliest crewed spaceflight programs and continued through the Apollo and Space Shuttle eras, recognizing the psychological importance of personal connection to home during long and demanding missions. These items might include family photographs, small keepsakes, or objects of personal significance, all carefully screened for safety and within strict mass and volume limits. In the immensity of cislunar space, these small, intimate objects carry a weight of meaning far beyond their physical mass. The Artemis II mission patch, a circular emblem designed to represent the mission's identity and legacy, traditionally incorporates elements that speak to both the specific objectives of the mission and the broader themes of the Artemis program. Mission patches are a deep-rooted tradition in human spaceflight, dating back to the Gemini program in the 1960s, and they serve as lasting artistic and symbolic records of each mission's crew and goals. The crew of Artemis II collaborated in the design of their patch, ensuring that it reflects their own identities, their mission's scientific character, and their sense of belonging to the long continuum of human space exploration. The sound of the Space Launch System at full thrust during the first moments after liftoff is one of the most physically overwhelming acoustic events produced by any human engineering system, generating a sound pressure level near the launch pad that would instantly damage hearing and could potentially cause structural damage to nearby objects if not for the elaborate sound suppression system that floods the launch mount with millions of gallons of water in the seconds before and during ignition. This water system converts acoustic energy into heat through steam generation, dampening the acoustic environment inside the spacecraft to levels that are demanding but survivable for the crew. The Artemis II mission will generate a significant public engagement and educational impact as well, with NASA planning extensive outreach programs, live coverage, and educational content designed to bring the experience of this historic crewed lunar flyby to audiences of all ages across the United States and around the world. The agency's tradition of open public communication about its missions dates back to the early Mercury and Gemini programs, when television broadcasts of spaceflight activities first captured the imagination of a global audience, and it continues today through digital platforms, social media, and interactive educational experiences. The trajectory that Artemis II will follow around the Moon is mathematically described as a free return trajectory, but it is more specifically designed to take the spacecraft to a point approximately 4,600 miles beyond the far side of the Moon, a distance that will set a new human spaceflight record for the farthest any human beings have ever traveled from Earth. The previous record was held by the crew of Apollo 13, who in 1970 reached approximately 254 kilometers above the lunar surface and about 400,171 kilometers from Earth, guided there by an emergency free return trajectory after a mid-mission equipment failure. Artemis II will eclipse that record in the peaceful, planned context of a successful mission. The Orion spacecraft's reaction control system, a set of small thruster jets distributed around the surface of both the crew module and the service module, allows the vehicle to perform attitude changes, small orbital adjustments, and docking maneuvers with great precision throughout the mission. These thrusters fire in carefully calculated combinations to rotate the spacecraft around any of its three axes or to translate it in any direction, providing the astronauts and ground controllers with full three-dimensional control authority over the vehicle at every point in the mission. The thrusters burn monomethylhydrazine and nitrogen tetroxide, propellants chosen for their reliability and storability in the deep space thermal environment. The Orion spacecraft carries a dedicated crew optical alignment sight, a simple but essential optical instrument that allows astronauts to manually verify the spacecraft's attitude relative to the stars if the automated navigation systems encounter problems. This instrument connects the most modern of spacecraft to the deepest traditions of celestial navigation, acknowledging that sometimes the most reliable tools are the simplest ones. the ability to look directly at the stars and understand where you are in the universe based on their positions. The stars that guided ancient mariners across terrestrial oceans can still guide modern voyagers across the ocean of space. The European service module that powers and sustains the Orion spacecraft was built at Airbus facilities in Bremen, Germany, assembled with contributions from 11 European Space Agency member nations, reflecting the broad international coalition supporting the Artemis program. The service module provides the Orion spacecraft with approximately 1,850 pounds of force during its main engine burns, and its propellant tanks hold enough bipropellant to perform all of the trajectory correction maneuvers and systems management burns required throughout the mission and still leave a comfortable reserve margin. The module separates from the crew module just before re-entry, burning up in the atmosphere while Orion continues safely to splash down. The Artemis II mission will carry several scientific payloads in addition to its primary human spaceflight validation objectives, including instruments designed to measure the space radiation environment with greater precision than ever before with human crew members present. These measurements will contribute to the development of more accurate radiation exposure models for deep space human missions and will inform the design of future spacecraft shielding systems, astronaut dosimetry protocols, and the medical standards applied to crewed deep space flight. Science and safety are deeply intertwined in Artemis II. The Artemis program is part of a broader U.S. national space policy framework that envisions the Moon not merely as a destination for periodic crewed visits, but as a permanent outpost of human civilization, a place where people can live and work for extended periods, conduct science, develop resource extraction capabilities, and ultimately serve as a proving ground for the technologies and techniques that will eventually support human missions to Mars. This long-term vision is laid out in documents including the National Space Exploration Campaign Report and successive space policy directives, which provide the policy backbone for NASA's sustained commitment to the Artemis program. The parachute system that will lower the Orion capsule safely to the Pacific Ocean at the conclusion of the Artemis II mission consists of 2 drogue parachutes and 3 main parachutes that deploy in a carefully timed sequence as the capsule descends through the atmosphere. The main parachutes, each measuring approximately 116 feet in diameter when fully inflated, are among the largest parachutes ever used on a crewed spacecraft. Vast orange and white canopies that together create a combined drag area sufficient to slow the spacecraft from hundreds of miles per hour to the safe splashdown speed of roughly 17 miles per hour. The sight of those 3 enormous parachutes billowing above the descending capsule is one of the most beautiful images in all of spaceflight. The Artemis II mission is also a test of the human factors engineering built into the Orion spacecraft, the study and optimization of how human beings interact with their tools, their environment, and each other in the confined and demanding setting of a deep space capsule over an extended period. Human factors considerations shape everything from the placement of controls and displays to the color temperature of the spacecraft's lighting, the acoustic environment, the arrangement of sleeping facilities, and the ergonomics of the crew couches during the high-G phases of launch and re-entry. Good human factors engineering is largely invisible when it works, making the crew's experience feel natural and manageable. The Artemis II mission is expected to generate an outpouring of public and media attention comparable in some ways to the excitement generated by the early Apollo missions, as it represents the first time in more than 50 years that human voices and heartbeats will be present in the vast space between Earth and the Moon. The emotional and symbolic resonance of that human presence in deep space, of 4 specific people suspended in the ancient silence of cislunar space, looking back at the whole Earth and out at the whole Moon, carries a weight of meaning that transcends the technical details of the mission. The Artemis II mission will use the Deep Space Network's 3 primary ground station complexes, located in Goldstone, California, Madrid, Spain, and Canberra, Australia, to maintain continuous communications coverage with the Orion spacecraft throughout the mission. By placing these 3 stations at roughly equal intervals around the circumference of the Earth, NASA ensures that as the planet rotates, at least one station always has line-of-sight contact with the spacecraft, providing uninterrupted telemetry, voice, and video communications. The elegant geometry of this global network is a quiet tribute to decades of careful planning. The Orion spacecraft's docking system is compatible with the International Standard Docking Interface, a common docking mechanism developed through collaboration between NASA and international partner agencies specifically to enable future spacecraft from different nations and commercial companies to connect with each other and with the Lunar Gateway. This interoperability represents a forward-thinking engineering decision that will pay dividends across many future missions, allowing the Artemis architecture to accommodate spacecraft built by different nations and companies without requiring custom interface adapters for each unique combination. The Artemis II astronauts will sleep in a rotation system that ensures at least 2 crew members are awake and monitoring the spacecraft's systems at all times, though the specific sleep schedule will be adapted to the mission timeline and crew preferences within established guidelines. Sleeping in microgravity is a uniquely peaceful experience once the body adapts. Astronauts in orbit describe floating gently in their sleep restraints with a sense of effortless weightlessness, and many report exceptionally vivid dreams in the unusual sensory environment of a spacecraft traveling through deep space. The rhythm of sleep and wakefulness aboard Artemis II will be carefully managed to maintain peak crew performance throughout every mission phase. The RS-25 engines that power the Space Launch System's core stage represent one of the most efficient rocket engines ever built for flight use, achieving a specific impulse, a measure of propellant efficiency analogous to fuel economy in automobiles, of approximately 452 seconds in the vacuum of space. This extraordinary efficiency is the result of decades of engineering refinement dating back to the engine's original development for the Space Shuttle program in the 1970s, incorporating sophisticated turbopump technology, high chamber pressures, and a deeply optimized combustion process that extracts maximum thrust from every kilogram of propellant burned. The Orion spacecraft's crew module is the only part of the entire Artemis launch stack that returns to Earth. Every other major component, from the solid rocket boosters and the core stage to the service module and the upper stage, is either expended during ascent or burns up during re-entry into the atmosphere. The crew module itself is designed for multiple flights after refurbishment, potentially flying up to 3 Artemis missions over its service life, which represents a meaningful step toward the greater reusability that will characterize future generations of deep space vehicles. The Artemis II mission is being conducted in accordance with detailed safety requirements developed through a process called probabilistic risk assessment, a methodology that systematically identifies and quantifies every significant risk to the crew and mission and develops mitigation strategies for each. This process produces numerical estimates of mission success probability and crew safety probability that NASA's leadership and external oversight bodies use to make informed decisions about when the mission is ready to fly. The same rigorous analytical approach has been applied to every NASA crewed mission since the lessons of early spaceflight challenges were incorporated into the agency's safety culture. The lunar South Polar region that future Artemis landing missions will target is characterized by a terrain of extreme contrasts, ancient crater rims that rise up to several kilometers above the surrounding plains and receive nearly perpetual sunlight, existing alongside crater floors lying in permanent shadow so deep and so cold that water ice deposited over billions of years by comet and meteorite impacts has never evaporated. Some of these permanently shadowed regions are among the coldest places in the entire solar system, with temperatures estimated to fall as low as -415 degrees Fahrenheit, colder even than the surfaces of objects in the outer solar system. The astronauts of Artemis II have each spent thousands of hours in spacecraft simulators, rehearsing every nominal phase of the mission as well as hundreds of contingency scenarios, system failures, communication dropouts, medical emergencies, trajectory deviations, learning to respond with calm competence to situations they hope never to encounter in actual flight. This training philosophy, deeply embedded in NASA's culture, ensures that when unexpected events occur, the crew's trained responses are automatic and reliable, reducing the cognitive load of managing an emergency while simultaneously dealing with the natural stress of spaceflight. Preparation is the quiet foundation of courage. The Artemis program enjoys the support of a broad international coalition formalized through the Artemis Accords, a set of bilateral agreements between the United States and partner nations establishing common principles, norms, and expectations for the conduct of human and robotic space exploration in the 21st century. As of the program's planning phase, more than 40 nations had signed the Artemis Accords, committing to principles including transparency, interoperability, peaceful purposes, the registration of space objects, and the responsible management of orbital debris. This diplomatic framework is a quiet but historically significant step toward the governance of humanity's growing activities beyond Earth. The Moon itself, which the Artemis II crew will see up close for the first time with human eyes since December 1972, is a world of stark and ancient beauty, a surface of gray anorthosite highlands and dark basaltic mare plains, pockmarked by billions of years of meteorite impacts that have produced a landscape of craters ranging in size from microscopic pits to impact basins hundreds of kilometers wide. The regolith, or lunar soil, is a finely pulverized powder of rock and mineral fragments produced by the constant bombardment of the surface by micrometeoroids over geological time, and it covers the entire lunar surface in a soft, silvery gray blanket of cosmic dust. The Artemis II mission will include a phase during which the crew tests the Orion spacecraft's manual attitude control system, a capability that allows an astronaut to fly the spacecraft using hand controllers in the event that the automated flight control system requires backup. This capability echoes the tradition of the Apollo astronauts, who were required to be skilled in the manual flying of their spacecraft, and it reflects NASA's philosophy that human crews should never be fully dependent on automated systems, particularly in the harsh and unpredictable environment of deep space where unexpected challenges can arise that require human intuition, judgment, and manual skill. The total mission cost of the Artemis II mission is a figure that reflects the extraordinary scale and complexity of the enterprise. The development, integration, testing, and launch of the Space Launch System and Orion spacecraft, together with the mission-specific preparations and the vast infrastructure of the ground support system, represents many billions of dollars of investment by the United States government and its international partners. This investment, when divided across the lifetime of the technology being developed, is often compared favorably to the cost of other large-scale national infrastructure projects, and its potential return in terms of scientific knowledge, technological innovation, and national capability is considered by many analysts to be very significant. The Artemis II crew will experience a total of approximately 127 hours of daylight and darkness cycles that differ entirely from the Earth-based 24-hour day. In cislunar space, the rhythms of light and dark are governed not by the rotation of a planet but by the spacecraft's orientation relative to the Sun, creating an environment where the normal cues that regulate the human circadian rhythm are absent. Managing the crew's circadian health, their internal body clocks, is an important medical challenge of the mission, addressed through carefully timed light exposure, structured activity and rest schedules, and if necessary, pharmaceutical support for sleep management. The Artemis II mission will, for a brief and extraordinary period during the lunar flyby, take its crew to a point where both the Earth and the Moon are visible simultaneously through the spacecraft's windows, a view of the entire Earth-Moon system available only from the unique geometry of cislunar space, achievable from no point on Earth's surface and from no station in low Earth orbit. The Earth, seen from the Moon's vicinity, is a disk approximately 4 times larger and 13 times brighter than the Moon appears from Earth, a luminous blue-white jewel suspended in the absolute black of space, beautiful beyond any terrestrial sunset. The Space Launch System's twin solid rocket boosters separate from the core stage approximately 2 minutes after liftoff, at an altitude of approximately 24 miles and a velocity of roughly 3,000 miles per hour, tumbling away through the atmosphere in great arcs of smoke and vapor while the 4 RS-25 main engines continue to burn for another 6 minutes, driving the stack higher and faster toward orbital velocity. The separation events are carefully choreographed through explosive bolts, springs, and the natural aerodynamic forces acting on the jettisoned boosters, ensuring that they fall safely away from the vehicle without any contact that could damage the main stage. The Artemis 2 crew members will perform a number of scientific observation tasks during the mission, including photographing geological features of the lunar surface from orbit, making observations of the tenuous lunar exosphere, the extremely thin near-vacuum atmosphere of the Moon consisting primarily of atoms of sodium, potassium, helium, and hydrogen liberated from the surface by solar radiation and micrometeorite impacts, and collecting environmental data about the deep space radiation and micrometeoritic dust environment that future long-duration crewed missions will need to navigate and survive. One of the most important technical demonstrations of the Artemis 2 mission will be the testing of the Orion spacecraft's communication and navigation systems at the full range of Earth-Moon distances, including the specific radio frequency blackout that occurs during the period when the spacecraft is behind the Moon, a window of approximately 25 minutes during which no direct radio signal can pass between Orion and Earth, requiring the crew and the vehicle's autonomous systems to manage all operations independently. Future communication relay satellite systems, including elements of the Lunar Communications Relay and Navigation System, will eventually eliminate this communications shadow for missions in lunar orbit. The Artemis 2 crew will be the first human beings to actually see the lunar far side with their own unmediated eyes, not through a photograph, not through a telescope, but through the windows of their spacecraft, in real time, with the full sensory presence of actual human observation. Every image of the lunar far side that exists was taken by robotic spacecraft cameras, Soviet and American probes beginning in 1959 with the Soviet Luna 3 mission, and every human perception of that hidden hemisphere has been mediated by technology. The Artemis 2 crew will close that gap, becoming the first people to simply look. The Orion spacecraft structure was designed to pass through the Van Allen radiation belts, 2 donut-shaped regions of intense radiation trapped by Earth's magnetic field at altitudes between approximately 660,000 kilometers above Earth's surface, rapidly enough to minimize crew radiation exposure during the ascent phase of the mission. The passage through the Van Allen belts takes roughly between 30 and 60 minutes. And the Orion's shielding is designed to reduce radiation exposure to acceptable levels during this transit. The belts were first detected in 1958 by instruments aboard the Explorer 1 and Explorer 3 satellites, and their intense radiation environment has been a design driver for crewed deep space missions ever since. The Artemis 2 mission represents just one element of a broader U.S. and international scientific strategy for the exploration of the Moon, which includes not only crewed missions but also a constellation of commercial lunar payload services landers, NASA robotic orbiters and rovers, and eventually a network of surface instruments that will together build a comprehensive picture of the Moon as a geological, geophysical, and astrobiological target. This multivariate exploration strategy, robots and humans working in complementary roles, is considered the most effective and cost-efficient approach to extracting the maximum scientific value from humanity's return to the Moon. The Space Launch System generates so much acoustic and vibrational energy at liftoff that the ground support equipment and launch mount must be carefully designed to absorb and redirect these forces, protecting both the rocket itself and the surrounding infrastructure. The mobile launcher platform, the steel structure on which the SLS sits before and during launch, incorporates large flame trench systems that direct the rocket exhaust away from the vehicle, along with the water deluge system that absorbs acoustic energy and prevents the sound waves from damaging the rocket's payloads or the crew inside the Orion spacecraft. Engineering this acoustic environment is a discipline unto itself. The Artemis II crew's journey to the Moon and back will cover a total distance of approximately 590,000 miles, a figure that puts into perspective the extraordinary reach of human spaceflight technology. For comparison, the circumference of Earth is approximately 24,901 miles, meaning the Artemis II crew will travel a distance equivalent to nearly 24 complete circumnavigations of the planet during their 10-day mission. Expressed another way, if the crew could drive that distance in a car at highway speed, the journey would take approximately 10 to 12 months of continuous, uninterrupted travel. The Artemis II mission planning process includes detailed contamination control protocols designed to ensure that the spacecraft does not inadvertently carry terrestrial microorganisms to the lunar surface or its vicinity, not because the Moon is considered a likely habitat for life, but because scientific interest in the Moon's pristine ancient chemistry requires that any biological material found there in future investigations can be confidently attributed to lunar rather than terrestrial origins. These planetary protection protocols, while more relaxed for lunar missions than for Mars missions, reflect the scientific community's commitment to protecting the integrity of the solar system as a research environment. The Artemis II mission's human crew will be the most medically monitored group of individuals ever to travel beyond low Earth orbit, with their vital signs, radiation exposure, sleep quality, nutrition intake, and cognitive performance tracked continuously throughout the 10-day mission using a combination of wearable sensors, daily medical assessments, and regular consultations with the flight surgeon team at the Johnson Space Center. This comprehensive health monitoring serves both the immediate safety of the crew and the longer-term goal of building a detailed medical dataset that will inform the health standards and medical support requirements for future long-duration deep space missions. The Artemis II mission is scheduled to launch from Florida's Space Coast, a stretch of Atlantic coastline that has witnessed the dawn of the American space age. The first Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo launches, the Space Shuttle's first flight in April 1981, and now the beginning of humanity's second age of lunar exploration. The launch site's geography, situated at approximately 28.5 degrees north latitude, provides a favorable inclination for missions targeting the Moon, minimizing the energy required to reach the lunar trajectory and making the most efficient use of the rocket's immense propulsive capability. The total mass of the Orion spacecraft at launch, including the crew module, the service module, and all propellant, consumables, and cargo, is approximately 57,000 pounds, a mass that the Space Launch System must lift off the ground and accelerate to the velocities needed for a lunar trajectory, a task that requires the combined thrust of the RS-25 engines and the solid rocket boosters during the initial moments of flight when the vehicle is heaviest and moving most slowly. Every gram of mass in the spacecraft has been accounted for and justified, the result of thousands of engineering trade studies and design optimizations conducted over many years. The crew of Artemis II will maintain a detailed log of their mission through written records, photographic documentation, and video journals that will be preserved as part of the permanent historical record of the program. This tradition of mission documentation dates back to the Apollo era, when detailed mission reports, crew debriefs, and photographic archives created an extraordinary historical resource that continues to inform engineers, historians, and scientists more than 50 years later. The Artemis II records will similarly serve future researchers and explorers, providing a human witness to the beginning of humanity's second chapter of lunar exploration. The Artemis II mission's nominal launch window is carefully calculated to align the launch timing with the geometry of the Earth-Moon system in a way that allows the spacecraft to reach the desired trajectory around the Moon with the minimum expenditure of propellant and the maximum margin for trajectory corrections. These launch windows typically open for a period of minutes to a few hours each day, during a broader launch period of several days or weeks when the geometry of the Earth-Moon system is favorable. Missing a launch window means waiting for the next favorable alignment, which may be days or weeks away depending on the specific trajectory requirements. The Artemis II mission will also test the psychological resilience and interpersonal dynamics of a 4-person crew living and working in a small, confined space at extraordinary distances from Earth, conditions that have no true analog on Earth and that will inform the crew compatibility and selection criteria, the conflict resolution protocols, and the psychological support structures for future long-duration missions. The 10 days of Artemis II, while brief compared to the eventual months-long journeys to Mars, will provide valuable data about how people function as a team in the unique pressures of deep space, far from the familiar gravity and social context of home. The Artemis II mission, in its quiet and methodical progression through the steps of human space exploration, carries within it the accumulated dreams, sacrifices, and achievements of every engineer, scientist, astronaut, and citizen who has looked up at the moon and wondered about its surface, all the way back to the first human beings who sat beneath the open sky and let their minds drift outward toward the lights in the darkness above. When the Orion spacecraft swings silently around the far side of the moon and the crew briefly loses contact with Earth, they will be alone in a way that no human beings have ever been alone, surrounded by the vast, ancient quiet of cislunar space, carrying the hopes of all of humanity with them into the dark. And so, as the soft glow of the cosmos gradually fades into the gentle silence of the night, we come to the end of our peaceful journey through the story of NASA's Artemis II. May the quiet enormity of space remind you of how vast and unhurried the universe truly is, a place where time flows slowly, and all that matters is the steady rhythm of exploration and wonder. Rest now, let your thoughts drift like starlight across a calm and boundless sky, and know that tomorrow, like every great mission, will begin gently and with purpose. Good night and sweet dreams.